Cool. We are live. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you're joining us from. And welcome to this session on the really important topic of testing in Salesforce that I personally don't think it gets the credit it deserves. Yeah, I'm joined with David Brooks and Graham Stoner, both from Copado. Welcome, guys. And we'll give it a couple of minutes just for everyone to kind of join who's going to join, and then we'll kick it off and get started. Let us know in the comments as well where you're joining us from. It'd be great to see where everyone is making it from today. Awesome. It looks like we've got people from far and wide. We've got Pittsburgh, we've got Atlanta, Montreal, so a nice mix. And of course, I'm here in London as well. Cool. So we're a couple of minutes in. I guess it's as good a time as any to get started. So yeah, as I said, I'm here with David Brooks and Graham Stoner, and we're going to be talking about understanding the ROI of testing and in Salesforce. So guys, welcome and thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
Great to be here.
And yeah, let's kick it off.
Okay, great. Today we're going to do a brief introduction of the three participants, so you get a little bit of our background. Then we're going to talk. I'm going to share a few questions, conversation with Andrew, based on his experience in the Salesforce world. Then we've got a wonderful demo for you at the end to kind of bring home a new tool that will help in improving your ROI in testing. And then we want to save some time at the end for audience Q&A. So with that, I wanted to briefly introduce myself. My name's David Brooks, and currently the SVP of Evangelism at Copado. But prior to that, I was the head of product for Copado. And I've had 21 years in the Salesforce ecosystem. I worked at Salesforce from 2005 to 2014. Was the guy who led the team that launched AppExchange in 2005, and ran most of about a third of the product, Force.com product, while I was at Salesforce. But then I've been a customer and I've been a partner 3 times. So been in that ecosystem for quite a long time and seen it from the very beginning and all the changes that have been there. Andrew, you want to give a little bit of a brief background on your experience?
Yeah, I mean, my experience doesn't come close to yours now, which says a lot. I just changed my name on my little face because it just said Andrew before, which is of no use to anyone. But yeah, I'm Andrew Cook, Salesforce technical instructor at Salesforce Ben. I've been in the ecosystem for I think it's 13 years now. Predominantly as an admin. Yeah, it's a this is particularly a topic that I've got some strong views on, shall we say. And Graham, over to you.
Yeah. Well, hi, everybody. I'm Graham Stoner. I am a solution engineer here at Copado, and I focus specifically on our testing solution here, Copado Robotic Testing, and the other pieces that we'll see today. But yeah, and I come from a QA background. I ran a team for a little bit, sat in the chair. I did manual testing. I did automated testing. I was actually shopping for automated solutions when Copado found me. I'm sort of the junior guy on the team here with the least amount of time in the actual Salesforce ecosystem. I was a user for a while, but Copado has been actually my experience. But definitely, I got a quick introduction and kind of a continual introduction in that I work with lots of different Salesforce users every week and get exposed to lots of different environments. So I had to learn Salesforce very quickly, and it's been a wild ride, but I like being here, and I'm excited to be talking with you all today.
Awesome. So let's get to the first section here. We're going to go through a series of 6 questions with Andrew, and these questions are not all focused on ROI, but they basically form a background for return on investment. And one of the things to keep in mind as we go through these, return on investment has two pieces, right? There's the investment part. How much are you investing in your testing situation, and then the return, which is how much time and money are you saving when you automate tests. And I recently read an article that was quite interesting, and it took the contrarian view that you shouldn't actually automate most of your tests. Well, I think they were trying to be controversial, and I think they succeeded. But let's go through that, because I think a lot of people, that article made me think about, is there an ROI, and when is there an ROI, and what goes into it? But first, let's start with this. I think Salesforce testing has challenges that traditional software development doesn't quite have. And Andrew, I'm interested, what do you think are the common challenges that Salesforce development teams face especially when they're using the traditional testing tools out there?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges is that there's almost a disconnect between kind of admins and pro code developers, essentially. So I think a lot of admins are not probably as well versed with the different aspects of testing as maybe they should be. Especially though, like they'll be, I mean, we've all heard the phrase accidental admin, the kind of people that have found themselves in the role without necessarily going out to try and get it, if that makes sense. Whereas I think on the flip side, kind of pretty much all traditional pro code developers will generally all know all about the different aspects of testing, even if they're not necessarily come from a Salesforce background, because development and testing go hand in hand, whereas that's not always the case with admins, shall we say.
Yeah, I've actually heard, I've seen in the space that the admins say it's point and click. I mean, why do I need to even test it? It's just configuration. So why do I need to test?
Yeah. It's been a mantra of Salesforce for many years, right? So it's kind of been drummed into a lot of people that it is clicks, not code. And as well, on top of that, Salesforce do their own sort of tests whenever there's any release as well. So there's probably a lot of people out there that just think, well, the testing's done for me to an extent.
Right. And how about automation? Do you see in the Salesforce practice, do you see many teams that actually have automation resources provided to them, or are kind of there on their own?
In my experience, I think as one thing to bear in mind is that this will depend a lot on the size of the organization. I think a lot of smaller organizations with a smaller kind of use case of Salesforce, I guess, tend to do more manual testing compared to much larger organizations that probably do have like different testing teams and those kind of resources.
Yeah, I think we see the same thing in our world as well. Okay, why don't we move on to the next question? What do you think are the impact? I think Salesforce it's wonderful that you get these new features 3 times a year. Christmas comes 3 times a year in the Salesforce ecosystem, right? You got the seasonal releases that are out there, and that's great, but it can actually cause a little bit of challenge, I think. So, what do you see the impact of these seasonal updates in the Salesforce world if you're using a testing tool like Selenium, for example?
I think one of the biggest issues around this is the use of shadow DOMs that encapsulate components and the styling. So if we take Selenium as an example, it natively doesn't support shadow DOM traversal. So that will require additional workarounds to try and kind of get that to work, which in turn could cause some tests to break in terms of different scripts and things like that. So obviously, whenever Salesforce introduces a new feature on the front end, especially from like an admin's point of view, from the front end is just a new feature that may have a different API name. That's probably as far as an admin probably looks at things and as far as it goes. Whereas on the back end, you'll have different like the structure of HTML and IDs changing and all these kinds of things that will break the scripts in the background. So there's a lot to this sort of thing that a lot of people probably don't think about as much as maybe they should do.
Yeah, I think that's the other point of the ROI calculation is that it's not only in writing the test the first time. The investment is not just in writing the test the first time. Depending on the tools that you choose, you could actually required to update the test every time Salesforce does a release. Some of the DOM locators we actually see get impacted when they do patch releases. It's not just the 3 times a year. It's sometimes with patch releases. So ROI calculation is not just creating an automated test the first time, but it's also maintaining that test over time. And the updates from Salesforce, I think, are an impact to that, as you said, because of the DOMs and the shadow DOMs. One of the ways to minimize that, by the way, is using a testing tool that relies on the visible portion of the screen and what a user would see, which doesn't actually change between releases that frequently, versus the DOM locators that are deep in the heart of the HTML, as you said. Cool. Well, let's go on to question number 3. What are some of the misconceptions about cost and complexity of implementing the automations in Salesforce? So is it really that difficult and complex to automate?
No, I don't think it is. But I think one of the biggest kind of misconceptions is probably that automated testing is too expensive. That seems to be the biggest feeling among people that aren't using it. And although that there will be, like any tool, there will be an initial investment in kind of the initial setup for the tools, the training, etc. In the long run, it will probably save you money. I think the biggest sentiment to that as well is that I can't think I've ever heard someone who has automated testing saying that they wish they hadn't invested in that, whereas a lot of people that don't probably say that they do wish they had made that investment at some point.
Yeah.
And another thing, like we touched on, is about with it only being for large organizations. I think that's something that a lot of people think that's not necessarily the case these days.
Yeah, I think trying not to steal some of the thunder that Graham is going to be showing in a few minutes, but to think, just realize that writing scripts is not the only way of automating tests. There are several tools that will help you capture the steps that you're taking through clicks, the same way that and generate scripts from the clicks that you do. So I think that's another misconception, is you think you have to be a professional coder in order to write tests, and maybe that's true in something like Selenium, but I think that there are alternatives. And to get back to the ROI theme, realize that really the return on your investment comes from the ability to run the test multiple times. I mean, a lot of times when you're releasing, you have the forward think, you think about testing the actual features that you've released, and that's important. But anybody that's been in the Salesforce space for a long time is probably run across the term happy soup. And happy soup is really the fact that all of the metadata within a Salesforce org, unless you've been really good about packaging everything, all of that metadata is really kind of there to be changed. And so you can change something in a new feature that negatively impacts. I'm using a euphemism there. It breaks. You can do something on purpose that makes a feature work very well without realizing that 5 other teams in different organizations rely on that feature that you just changed, and you've broken 5 people with this new feature. So being able to actually run your tests, not only when you're releasing the features, but running the tests multiple times, every time you release a new feature, to be able to run the regression test and make sure you didn't break something that was already successfully released before. So let's move on. With evolving landscape, of Salesforce, how important is it, do you think, to integrate your testing tool with your processes like Agile and DevOps? How does I mean, testing is part of DevOps, right? I mean, it's plan, build, test, release, and operate, and so testing is a big part of DevOps, but it feels like that testing should be integrated with CI/CD. At least Copado believes that. I was wondering to get your thoughts on it. How important is that, to integrate your CI/CD in your testing?
Yeah, I think it's really important. I also think it's probably worth a mention that it almost feels like, from a Salesforce point of view, they've kind of come a little bit late to the party in terms of DevOps. It seems to only be getting the sort of traction that it deserves now, whereas in any other software walk of life, it's been around for a long time. So that's one of the things that I'd say on that. But yeah, I think having it integrated is so important, because obviously the main point of DevOps especially is just having your release cycles, so you can sort of develop and push your releases as quickly and efficiently as possible. So testing needs to be a big part of that, because if you get the testing wrong, then everything goes wrong. And
yeah, we've heard the phrase shift left and shift right, and it's like, I think when to test is really important. And if you're not synchronizing, if you're not running your tests based on your CI/CD system, your integration and your release management, then you're going to run the risk of not testing it at the right time. And effectively with shift left, it's all about discovering these problems early and catching them early, because it's a lot less expensive to fix a bug if you find it before or during integration, rather than after, God forbid, after it's being released into production. A dirty little secret that I'd like to share for everybody listening: one of my teams actually created change sets, I think back in 2007, and then we did nothing with them for more than 10 years. So I deeply apologize to all of you people out there that had to put up with change sets for so long. It's I guess the good news is that I wouldn't have had a job at Copado if my teams had continued and built DevOps out to the right level. Let's move on. That's question number 4 and 5. What do you think? Let's talk about the future. What kind of innovations do you think will shape the future of Salesforce testing over the next few years?
I think it'll be naive to not mention AI at this point. I think there's been such a big push in everything AI over the past 12 to 18 months or so. It's only I'm surprised that we've not seen more of AI powered testing on the Salesforce front already, considering all of the other different AI features that have been kind of rolled out over the last year or so. So I think that's one of the big things. So we're going to see more AI powered tools for generating tests and optimizing the execution of those tests as well.
I think you're absolutely right, and as a matter of fact, in about 2 minutes, you'll see a little bit of a preview for that. I'm taking a look at the time, and we want to make sure we save time for the demo and questions at the end. So, final question for you, Andrew: what advice would you give to organizations that are hesitant to move? I mean, I guess this is 2 parts, right? We've got these small organizations that do mostly manual testing, and large organizations that have professional testing teams, but they're using tools that were built by cavemen using stone knives and bear skins, to steal a phrase from a book that I read in the past. What advice would you give them? It's a huge move, right?
Yeah, it is a huge move. One thing that I'd probably say is to start small and scale up. So maybe start with a pilot project. That's how I've seen these things kind of work in the past. So not trying to overhaul everything at once, and starting with something small, like maybe a module just for your Salesforce reports, for example, and instead of automating all your testing at once, and then you could maybe move on to the sort of more repetitive tasks that everyone is using. So yeah, I mean, like lead conversion process, for example, be a prime example that you could automate in this sense, because it's something that most organizations are using, and it's a really good place to start with sort of your automated testing. And then as well, it'd be a good idea to have a kind of a hybrid approach, I guess. So maybe you could manually test just for your new customizations that are being rolled out, but then you could have your regression tests automated, that is making sure that nothing is being broken that you rolled out previously.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think all of us are into Agile today. Agile says, break it up into bite-sized pieces and iterate, and that's exactly what we're seeing is folks. You can't boil the ocean, so start small. Start with your new features, but then do a Pareto analysis of what are the most used features, what are the features that are most critical to your business processes, and make sure that you've got tests to cover that. Because those are the ones that are going to be the biggest bang for the buck and the biggest embarrassment if they break in production. So, hey, thanks a lot for that insight. And I think now it's time to move on to Graham, and let's do a demo and show us some stuff that maybe could address some of these issues that we've talked about.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks, guys. And I'll ready to share my screen in just a moment here. So what we're going to do today, we'll take a look at everything that we just discussed here. I liked a couple of things that Andrew called out there. Start small, the hybrid approach. So I'm going to talk to both of those pretty specifically here. And I would say, in a lot of ways, another thing that came up there is automation too expensive? I would almost argue, can you afford not to, in a lot of ways? So again, with a balanced approach here. So I did mention that I do have a QA background. I sat in the chair, did the job. I'm kind of curious if anybody on the call here has testing responsibilities. I'm curious What are you testing and how are you testing it? Please feel free to throw that in the comments. We'd love to see, I guess, kind of just get some feedback from those of you out there all over the place, kind of see what's going on there. And where I'll start this conversation before we jump into the demo is, generally speaking, I spend a lot of my week talking to different Salesforce folks who are prospective customers for us. And the first thing that we usually do is trying to get to know them, their testing process, and where they're trying to go with it. And two themes almost always come up from every one of those conversations. The first one, testing is a bottleneck. I hear it in almost every call. And the second one is, we are in dire need of regression testing. So just like David was mentioning, I may be working on this portion of the application, but what's happening over here that I might have broken by fixing something here, well, you put that in quotations. So those are the two things that come up a lot on these conversations. And as a former tester, the idea of testing being a bottleneck, I got a bit of a knee-jerk reaction to that. I'm like, well, so let's look at what I'll just tell a story from what this looked like when I tested. We would maybe do 2 or 3 week sprints, and in the first 3 days, I would probably have my sprints, all of my tests planned out and ready to go. And then I'd have to find something else to keep myself busy with for the next, maybe till the end of the sprint, maybe 2 or 3 days before the end of the sprint, when I finally get my hands on that application to be able to start running my manual tests. So I'm kind of in fire drill territory. I blaze through my functional tests as quickly as I can, sending bugs back and getting them fixed and retesting. Then I got to move on to regression. And inevitably what would happen is I would get in such a time crunch that maybe I'd be able to run that suite through once or twice. But if I find bugs in regression, in theory, I should probably run that whole suite again. And I may start running out of time to actually be physically able to actually accommodate that in the actual testing cycle. So I would argue maybe testing isn't necessarily so much the bottleneck. Just historically speaking, testing has just not been playing with the same efficiency set of tools that the rest of the process has been playing with. And that's where Copado Robotic Testing, where we're going to take a look at today, really comes in here and makes this journey a lot easier. So before I move on, I'm kind of curious if anybody has sat on a testing team and done that on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being, I have no idea what you're talking about, to 10 being, I feel really seen right now. How closely can you relate to that, I guess, that time crunch, the story that I just kind of shared there? So Andrew, I'm ready to share whenever you are here. I might have to log back in here. I was kind of jabbering over this, but hopefully let me know when you guys can see my screen there. I'm just seeing the slides there. I see a 10 from Brandon there. Awesome.
There we go. You're up on the air. You're live, Graham.
Oh my gosh, you guys. Well, hey, I see you for what it's worth. I see you and I feel you. I'm glad to see that I'm not alone in this journey here. Well, what we're going to talk about today, so Copado Robotic Testing, historically, at least I've been working for Copado for 2 years now, and historically, my story has been around automation. That's something that I've been talking about, being able to extend that capability to both programmers, but also completely non-programming types alike. It's important to be able to give non-programmers a voice, because you don't have to be a programmer to be a good tester. And that's the kind of thing, that's the voice we want to be able to speak into this process. Testing is a really important mindset to be able to capture. But in the last few months, as David kind of alluded to a moment ago, we've made a couple of adjustments to our product, or to our solution set here, in that we've introduced a tool called Explorer, which is pulled up on the screen just now. And we'll start walking through that. And the idea of Explorer is to be able to not only make it possible for automation to be kind of approachable to everybody on our programming spectrum, but also start to capture some of these manual testing actions in a really efficient way, and be able to minimize and maybe even eliminate some of the feedback loops that get wrapped up there. So we'll take a look at that, and then we'll also take a look at Copado's Test Copilot, which is a generative AI tool. I still can't say that after all this time. Generative AI tool, which is going to help us take our happy path test cases, stretch them really far, much farther, and then even be able to repurpose them into that regression piece that clearly comes up on every conversation that I'm on, and it's a big need out there. So what I'm going to do right now, we'll assume that I'm a manual tester. I'll say that I'm working from a script here, working from a manual test script, but this could be I just got quoted there. I like it. So we'll be working through this from here. I'll be taking this from the perspective of a manual tester, kind of working from a script. But what I'm going to do, we're going to say that we added a pick list to my contact record, which I did. And it's a primary color pick list. I was trying to find something simple. I'm not the most imaginative when it comes to examples like that. But what I'm going to do now is actually just walk through the process that I would normally do if I were actually manually testing this. So as you can see, I've opened up my contact form. I'm going to give it some data to work with. We'll say, I'm going to say Johnny, be good. Making that up. And if we scroll down a little bit here, the first thing that I'm going to do is throw a negative test case at this. We'll kind of make this a little bit more interesting. So if you're kind of newer to testing or unfamiliar with the term negative test case, I'm just intentionally going to break the page and validate that I get the error message I'm expecting. So I'm going to click the save button without populating all my required fields. And as you can see, I get the error message I was expecting. So if I highlight that, one thing you may not have noticed is that in this palette, we're actually recording all of the steps that I'm taking on this in the course of this manual test execution. So while I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and populate a couple more fields. We'll say, oh, come on, a little bit of a lag there. And I'm going to take a look at my primary color pick list here. And if we select this, there are only two colors in here. As a tester, whether this is in the requirements or not, I think we're missing a primary color, which I believe is yellow. I'm not an expert at these things, but I'm going to add a finding now. So I'm in the middle of my manual test, and without having to step out and do any other crazy stuff in line with my manual test, what I can do now is actually highlight the spot on the screen that's in question. In this case, we should have the option for yellow in here. Let's get that. So we'll say, please add yellow value. So at this point, I'll save my finding here. So now I've reported the unexpected thing that I saw in the course of my test case. So what I'll do now is just finish out this. Let's make sure that I can use the values that I was looking for there. What I'm going to do then is save this. And just as I visually validated my error message, I'm actually going to visually validate my toast message here. And this actually is something that Copado can leverage from Salesforce to make asynchronous behaviors. If you're familiar with what that's looked like to automate, those asynchronous behaviors can be tricky, and this is a really helpful way to be able to deal with that. And while I'm here, since I'm being a good tester, I'm going to clean up after myself in my org. So I will not only create but also delete my record, and then save it, and then also validate that I've seen it. So at this point, I've completed my manual test. It's safe for me to stop my exploration session. I can say, yes, I can end that. And while this is compiling, I'm going to call out the next story from the life of Graham. So when I was testing, I would come across bugs, and I would have the immediate, hey, yes, I found a bug. And actually, it looks like, John, you actually are segueing me here. So this is great. So I would find a bug and I'd be excited. And then I would think to myself, oh man, now I have to document this. Paperwork. So what that might look like, I need to come up with a title that doesn't conflict with other titles that I've already added into the bug queue, to the backlog or whatever that goes into. I've got to come up with a description that kind of says, hey, this is what I was expecting to find, and this is what I actually found. That description may need some screenshots, just like we kind of took a look at there. I might need to add some markup and annotation to those screenshots to make it more apparent to the developer, kind of make it easier for them to see what happened. But the worst part for me, especially, maybe not so much if I was doing a scripted test, but if I was doing exploratory testing, the worst part for me was trying to remember what I did to generate that bug. And because if I was just doing poke testing, I could have just been kind of pushing buttons and seeing what I might break on this page. And that can be really hard for me to track. I have a bad short-term memory, and so it was hard for me to kind of remember those steps. So inevitably, what would happen, I'd finally get my bug written up. This might take me from, who knows, 5 to 30 minutes, depending on how complex that bug is and how much evidence I need to gather. I'd send it to the developer, and the first thing I would get back 10 minutes later was, hey, Graham, thanks for working so hard on this bug. I can't replicate this. Can we jump on a call? So hey, I've probably spent 15 minutes of my time now. Now I've got to go spend another 15 minutes And I've got to take up developer time now too. So we're maybe, who knows, we could be 45 minutes deep before we even get to the point where the developer is able to see this bug manifest. So this will be my next kind of outreach here. Scale of 1 to 10, 1 being, I have no idea what you're talking about, 10 being, I feel seen right now. How closely can you relate to that story? Writing up bugs and kind of having to play, we'll say, communicative ping pong back and forth to try and figure out what actually happened with that bug. So the question got asked by can we use this for, can this be used for reporting bugs as well? And the answer is yes. So we're actually going to move into that. Explanatory testing. Yes. Actually, as a Katerina, that's a great way of putting this. So we are indeed doing exploratory testing. Scale of 1 to 10, we got a 250. So it sounds like you feel very, very seen right now, John. So what we'll do now, what I want to call out here is we can go straight to that finding that I called out. So let's report this in a bug, and then we'll come back and see what the developer has at their disposal to be able to go and reconcile that bug. So in this case, I'm going to go and say, hey, I want to report this bug. Here's a screenshot that I snag. I'm able to report that finding, and we'll just say bug. I'll put a timestamp on here of a 6:05:1036. I didn't get to comment, but I'm in Colorado, so I'm on Mountain Time. And we'll say yellow. Well, please add yellow value to pick list. Always, hey, if you're a tester, always be polite to your developers. They didn't screw this up on purpose, just for what it's worth. So what I can do now is share this with my developer. I'm going to save this. And we're not going to spend a lot of time. David kind of alluded to the fact that Copado is also a CI/CD pipeline management tool for Salesforce. And we do help deployments and we can really help streamline that process in here. We'll take a quick glimpse at that. In fact, I initiated my session right out of Copado here, where those credentials were being managed for me. And as you can see, this is the bug that I just wrote up. And it's being added into Copado as a user story. This can be communicated over as a bug. I can also send this to Jira and Azure right now. And I believe we're kind of looking at extending that to different, maybe some other different platforms too. But at this point, this is what the developer would have at their disposal. They have an exact execution trace in plain text language of what I did to generate that bug, the steps that led up to it. And if that's not enough, they have a link back to the Explorer page where they can go back and have an not only exact execution trace of everything I did, but screenshots along every step of the way. And if for some reason that's not enough, they also have the ability to use the exploration video here. And I will say that just as somebody who has to debug my test cases and oftentimes the things that I develop in Salesforce, it is really helpful to have video evidence of what we saw on the screen, be able to fast forward right to it, kind of using the table of contents on the left here, if you will. So at this point, we're able to give the developer all these artifacts. So it's incontrovertible evidence, it's objectively spoken, and it's deeply descript in a way that I don't have to communicate this to the developer anymore. This bug took me 30 seconds to write up and send over to the developer. They have no reason to come back to me because not only do they have the exact execution trace here, they have everything that they need to be able to find out why this bug happened. There's no more information that I can provide to them. So at this point, I'm either minimizing or eliminating that feedback loop between myself as a developer or myself as a tester talking to the developer. And as I kind of called out before, that we could have spent 45 minutes playing ping pong figuring this out. Imagine if we're finding 10, 15 bugs during a release cycle, the time savings. And so I'm kind of tying it back to the ROI discussion. Time is money, and what kind of time savings could we see if we're able to minimize, if not eliminate, that feedback loop?
Hey, Graham, speaking of saving time is money, we're really getting pressed on time. So why don't you wrap up this phase? And I heard something about AI. I'd love to see how that fits into the story.
Of course, yeah. So the next bit here, the next bit of transition is we're going to take what we created here and actually convert it into a working automation script. So I can actually just copy the script that was grabbed here.
Well, how did you create that?
So this is actually a result. This is a byproduct of our manual testing script. It's a great question. This is actually the language. This is the language that our automation tool speaks. And we're actually recording it in that language so we can quickly repurpose it over. But this is a byproduct of our test. Well, even a real product is the normal product of our exploration session. So this is something we can reuse later here. This is what we were recording.
Wow.
So if we jump over here, I can paste that in. And what I've got here, we're in the actual automation portion of our tool now. Quick tour, you'll notice we've got a browser window that we can interact with. Similarly, like we did before, we can actually add some recording steps here too. But this is where we would actually start building this automation. I've got my test case name here. I've got some metadata tags. This was specific to my contacts page. So I'm going to log in using our home keyword. That keyword is going to try and take us to our Salesforce org. It will conditionally log us in if we need to. And it will also automate multi-factor authentication for us if we need to. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit before we press forward there. Hopefully that's close enough for everybody to see. And what I've got now, if we, where's my formatting? Oh, it's not there. Okay, well, we'll deal with it later. What I've got now, I can actually pick and choose the lines I want to execute. But if I run this, this is actually a working automation just as it is. Now, while this is running, and we can kind of watch it run. While this is running, I'll call out a couple things that you guys, if you're testers, may have noticed. One, I didn't actually add any steps to validate this. And this is a kind of a one-trick pony at this point. It's only going to create the same record every time. So what I did here, before we jumped on here, just because it does take a couple seconds to generate, I actually threw a couple prompts at our test copilot before we jumped on here. One, the first thing that we're going to do is use test copilot to add steps to validate this record after it's been created. And then we're also going to parameterize it. So for anybody who's not familiar with that term, what we're doing is taking out all of the hard-coded data that makes this a one-trick pony and making it a dynamic test case. And we'll talk about that in a second here. But if I scroll back to the top here, this is the prompt that I asked. Before deleting that newly created lead, let's add some steps to validate and please parameterize it for me. And I just provided the test script that I created here or something similar. And as you can see, what it's done is actually taken the script and built it out in a way where it notices that we need to check out first. We'll check the verification steps it added. It recognizes we need to click the details tab to go over and verify what we added. But the other part here is that it's actually referencing variable names now instead of using the data that I originally put in this test case. So rather than just doing one thing every time now, we can actually run this. We can run this test script from a CSV file that may have hundreds of values in it, which stretches our test case significantly in lots of different ways. We could run that from SQL queries. We could run that from randomized data that we generate in the course of the test case. So depending on what you're testing this, there's a lot of flexibility to be added here. So one, we've stretched the test case significantly. The other part here that I also added, let's face it, sometimes we're building test cases against something that doesn't exist already. So we may not even be able to leverage the recorder. What if we want to ask Copado Test Copilot to build a test case for us? So in this case, I actually just described what we're adding in the course of this sprint and asked Copilot to build test cases that verify that that's actually being done correctly. And as you can see, what it's done is broken this out into three. It's going to test for each one of the colors. And in this case, it's created some custom keywords to make that go faster. And what's nice about that is I can actually reuse these keywords in different places now. It's a way to bundle steps that we may execute over and over again that are not going to change. And it makes it a lot easier for us to build these test cases much more usefully and reusably. So I think
Can I double click on that? So,
please.
The first part of what you just showed was you took the test that was created automatically during your exploration, and you basically gave it a prompt and said, validate the results at different stages and parameterize this for me. And it basically spit out the parameterized test with all the things that you requested. So
absolutely,
that's taking an automatically generated test and then making it better, making it much more appropriate for a regression. And then the second use case, the code didn't exist, the UI changes didn't exist. You just basically said from the user story, here's what we want to build. Give me a test I can run when the code is ready. So that's like test-driven development and shifting all the way to the left, all the way into the planning phase, right?
Exactly. And to that point, we could actually copy and paste this right into our suite right now And I could jump into Copado and assign this to a user story as a quality gate in a matter of seconds, so that a tester, when they think they finished their development, just like David called out, they could run it against the test that I've developed here, or actually in this case, that Copilot has developed for me, to get that immediate feedback to say, hey, this actually does what I think it's going to do or not.
Okay. There's a question that came in, and we're kind of nearing. Andrew, how much more time do we have available for questions or further demo? You're on mute, Andrew.
On mute.
Sorry, I think we've got five minutes or so we've got time for a few questions. And
all right. So one of the questions that came in is, can we use test scripts that validate child or parent record updates from code or automation?
I can lay into that one.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm asking you.
Great. Yeah. The answer is absolutely yes. So in this case, let's say that I created my contact record, and as a result of that, maybe I get a child or I need to go back and validate on the parent record. There's nothing to stop us from continuing this journey and just navigating to that directly, just like we would as a user. But there are also some faster ways to do that. We can also leverage API calls. We have a whole library that is built to make that API call very accessible to somebody who may not be comfortable building an API call in something like, oh my gosh, I lost it. The API testing tool. It's got the rocket. Postman.
Okay.
Somebody who's not comfortable building an API call from the ground up. So there are several different ways to do that, whether we're just looking at the back end or if we want to validate it directly from the UI.
All right, I want to there's another question that just came in, and I'm going to restate it state it in a different way. Are we limited to testing Salesforce as a Salesforce and Salesforce standard applications, or can we handle custom pages, Encino, SAP, Oracle? Are we kind of bounded into Salesforce using the robotic testing tool?
The answer there is no. We are not bound here. We can go to anything with a URL or an API that we have the credentials to access. So that's all fair game.
Awesome. So, I mean, that would be very helpful in an end-to-end test, right? Because things may start in Salesforce, but actually end in a financial system, or start in, let's say, start in Force.com application, but go into CPQ, go into Commerce Cloud, Marketing Cloud. These are possibilities, right?
Yeah. Well, and the good news here is you guys may have noticed, especially if you have some Selenium background or something that uses Selenium locators, we're actually just leveraging the text on the page here, which is a great way to make these test cases significantly more responsive to change. We could scramble the elements on this page, and as long as that text is still there, we can still leverage it. We also have some mechanisms in place to deal with label changes as well. But generally speaking, this makes these test cases, at least from my experience, I would say 90% more resilient than any of the Selenium-based test cases that I ever wrote.
So Lightning, Visual Force, Standard. I mean, are there still classic pages available? Did we finally get rid of all the classic pages out there?
I've had to build a couple of use cases against classic. It's not gone yet, I don't think.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, label text is on almost every application that we work with. And the good news is these keywords are going to be the same on all those applications, and we'll be able to interact with them just as easily.
Cool. Okay. One more minute, maybe, Andrew?
Yeah, if anyone's got any other questions, feel free to throw them in the comments. Yeah, we'll give it another minute or so.
Yeah. I know that I mentioned regression earlier, and one thing I would say is, because these tests actually are standing alone in this case, as a byproduct of my in-sprint test-driven development testing, I can actually just reuse this actual test script, add it to my regression suite. So that regression suite actually grows as a byproduct of my in-sprint testing. So I know I mentioned it, and I did at least want to revisit that, but I'm working on my contacts page right now. Maybe I move to another record in another couple sprint cycles. I still have these tests that stand as guardian against my contacts page to make sure changing something on my opportunities page didn't break something on my contacts page.
That's great. There's another question. Let's talk about timing. Can you add pauses, seconds or minutes between lines?
You can. The good news is you don't need to in most cases. Again, we're using time. So in this case, we're actually using timeouts on each one of these text elements. So for example, once I am able to validate that that toast message has popped up, and this is most of the time, that means that my backend process has completed and it's safe for me to move on and kind of what we talked about earlier, maybe go validate some of the child records that may have been a byproduct of saving this contact record.
That's really cool. If I'm not mistaken, I think we keep timestamps on the responses as well, right? We log how much time it takes for a page to respond, so you can actually over time detect any major variations in the response time that's out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Maybe time for one more question. Async,
Yes.
Async Apex and different browsers. How does it handle the browser update?
Yeah, so browsers, generally speaking, we can toggle within the cloud-based tool here. We can toggle between Chrome, Firefox, and Edge. So you can toggle those out as simple as changing the value there.
How about mobile?
Mobile, we do mobile testing as well. Yeah, native application and browser-based as well. We have that functionality too, and the keywords will look very similar. The language.
Awesome. I think we're at time, correct, Andrew?
Yeah. I think we're just about at time, so that's good timing. I mean, guys, before we finish, is there anything you want to kind of wrap up with?
I'll ask Graham if people have more questions after the session today. How would they connect with you if they wanted to ask?
You're welcome to email me at gstoner@copado.com. And if I'm not the right person, I'll find the right person to answer your question for you.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. As well, I know that you guys are sponsoring, or one of the sponsors for the World Tour in London tomorrow, which I'm going to be at. If anyone's joining,
if anyone from London, come by the booth and have a look.
Please do, yeah.
Awesome. I think we'll leave it there then, guys. David, Graham, thank you so much for that. That was so interesting. I would imagine that everyone tuning in has taken something away from this. I know that I have.
Yeah, to tie it back to ROI, if I could say on closing, if you've got a tool that enables you to manually test, but automatically turn that into an automated test, it really reduces the investment that you have to make in testing, and it really speeds up your ability to transition from being a manual testing organization to an automated full regression suite kind of organization. And and one further thing about the exploration, we didn't go into it, but exploratory testing by a subject matter expert is sometimes very valuable even as a manual test. So we're not saying eliminate all your manual tests. Exploring an application as a subject matter expert can really give you insights into where you might want to reinforce testing as well. So that's the reason that we built Copado Explorer. Is, we believe in exploratory testing, but we also want to make it really easy to take that and give you the ability to file bugs and give you the ability to turn that into automated testing with an AI agent that can help you put it into something that's appropriate for regression. So we're really excited about it, and I hope you guys are too.
Yeah.
Amazing. That is a perfect place to end it, David. So again, thank you everyone for tuning in. David, Graham, thank you so much, and we'll see everyone soon.
Yeah. Cheers, thanks, everybody. Thanks for the participation. Cheers.